Gareth from Be Digital here. What a great guest we have in store for our first show. I would describe him as a true thought leader in the AI space. He did a very interesting TED talk last year. He advises multiple tech companies and also advises government on AI and related subjects. PhD and senior lecturer at University College London. We covered decentralization, ethical technology, a bit of futurism and how he runs his company, and some really interesting content around that. We could have gone on for hours. Fascinating and passionate guy. Very interestingly, he's got a 30-year plan to remove the concept of countries and companies from the face of the planet, which you don't get many bigger goals than that. It was really good. So I give you Daniel Hulme. Interview basically to talk about your background and the background of the company and the journey you've been on, essentially. Okay, so can you just give us a brief intro to yourself?
Yeah.
And what your background is and how you come to join your current organisation?
Yeah, of course. I was born in a small seaside town in the north of England, and traditionally, I think the only way you used to be able to escape that town is prison or army. And I was going to go into the army, but I ended up somehow getting into UCL.
Yeah.
And did my degree in artificial intelligence. This was 20 years ago, before AI was cool, and then did my PhD in artificial intelligence. Spun out a company from UCL 10 years ago. It's an AI company, and I essentially do three things now. I run a master's program actually in UCL still in AI. So I've got about 100 students every year that go out there and apply emerging technologies to solving problems across lots of different businesses, and I do that stuff for fun. And I run Satalia, so I'm the CEO of Satalia, which is 100 people at the moment, and we build AI solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world. And I also travel the world educating politicians, academics, industry leaders about the impact of technology on society. So I get often referred to as a techno-activist. I'm deeply concerned about the future of humanity, and Satalia's purpose is to address many of the problems that we're going to see in the world over the coming few decades.
Wow, okay, so we'll move on to the future bit in due course, but can you give us a little broad overview of Satalia and what the vision and the purpose of the company is?
Well, so Satalia at the moment does three things. So we build AI solutions for companies, and I would be controversial and argue that nobody's doing AI. So I think there's a huge amount of hype around AI. I've been studying AI for 20 years, and I would argue nobody's doing it, and I'm very happy to explain that in a moment. So we build AI solutions for companies, and where we then have built a solution that solved a problem that nobody else has solved, we then look to then productize it. So we have a couple of products as well. Mm-hmm. One in logistics, where we've brought new technologies together to solve supply chain problems significantly better than historically, and also workforce allocation. So we have a product in allocating people to demand. And so that's the second thing that we do. The third thing that we do is we organize Satalia in a relatively unique way. We don't have any managers or hierarchies or KPIs. Everybody's free to do whatever they want. I'm trying to reinvent how an organization can operate without having traditional hierarchies. We organize ourselves like a swarm, and I want to scale that model to a planet. So actually I want to create a planet that doesn't have companies, that doesn't have countries. I've got a 30-year plan to remove the concept of companies and countries from this planet.
Wow, that is an amazing cause. I actually want to come and work for you. No, the concept of countries has always been quite baffling to me. It's come from tribalism, I think, isn't it? But it is ridiculous.
Yeah, if you were to build a planet from scratch, you would not organise it in this way.
No, absolutely. So what's your thoughts on, just out of curiosity, what's your thoughts on decentralisation and the concept of cryptocurrency and other decentralised technologies? Have
you looked at me? So I don't know how much research you've done about me, but decentralisation is essentially the thing that we're trying to do. We're trying to decentralise the planet.
Yeah.
We're trying to create a decentralised organisation, and we think that there's a future where anybody, anywhere in the world, is free to contribute to whatever the products they want, and to be fairly contributed for that contribution, and for those products not to be driven forwards by a centralised organisation, but to be driven forwards by a global community. So I think that there's a future where we don't have centralised companies like Facebook, Airbnb, Uber, many of these services that we're relying on as centralised companies that are driven to make profits for shareholders should and can be decentralized. And I want to create a decentralized planet.
So is that kind of anti-capitalist then, do you think?
No, actually, it's a really good question. So I've got a real problem with capitalism, but actually, if you think about it, it's ultra-capitalism. It's making the allocation of resources much more efficient. So at the moment, because capitalism is argued as being an efficient way to allocate resources to demand now. But actually, by giving people the freedom to be able to contribute to anything they want and remunerated for that contribution, whether it's a day or an hour or whatever, you're actually making ultra-capitalistic. Now, the problem with capitalism is that you can then have scenarios where you have individuals that have lots of power, lots of wealth that can actually cheat the system. So, and I can give you some examples of that if you want.
There's loads of examples everywhere.
Indeed. But I guess the challenge is that how do you create an ultra-capitalistic world, but still don't let that world succumb to the short-term drives that humans have that mean that we create an unsustainable future for ourselves. So this drive to accumulate goods, this drive to attract mates, that creates essentially a tragedy of the commons. How can we get humans to think about the longer term instead of just the short term?
Absolutely. And Gordon Gekko was right in terms of human beings. Yeah. Greed is good for human beings generally, inherently.
Yeah.
I think, but it's not good for the collective, is it?
That's right.
Because inequality happens.
That's right.
And people rise to the top too far, and people go to the bottom too far, and you have an imbalanced society.
Absolutely. So what I'm trying to do inside Satalia is trying to work out how can we use technology. How can we rethink an organizational structure and an economic structure, make it work locally, and then how do we start to scale that to 200 people, 1,000 people, to a planet? Mm-hmm. And that means challenging what the objective function is for humanity. At the moment, our objective function is to maximize GDP. It's a very stupid objective function. We don't have an agreed set of values for humanity, whether they should be crowdsourced or what, but we need to rethink all of these big questions. And now, because of AI is actually forcing us to question these things. So you're in your driverless car, and the car has a choice to either kill the kid or to go off the cliff. We're now having to make a decision about what is the most valuable decision in that situation. Do you kill the kid or do you kill you? And so we're having to now start to agree as a species what is value, and build that into our systems, which is a very exciting time for humanity.
Well, what do you think value is?
So I'm actually going through an exercise right now of building values for Satalia, which I'm actually asking myself, what are the values of humanity? What should the values be in this decentralized platform? Mm-hmm. And if you look at the values of corporates, almost every other corporate will have integrity, for example, as one of their values, or innovation, or teamwork, or whatever. And I've been
passion.
Yeah, exactly. and I actually have been studying philosophy and religions.
Don't get me going on that. On that tangent.
Well, we should.
Stoicism.
We should. So if you read all of this stuff, you start to see similarities across all of these different corpuses of text about what we agree and what we disagree. So, so for example, don't do to other people what you wouldn't do to yourself is a common theme that exists across different ideologies. And I think there are 4 core pillars. And what we're going to actually do is we're going to get some AI, some machine learning, natural language processing, to scour all of these different corpuses, whether they be corporate values or Taoism, Buddhism, and then try to identify, are there any core common values that exist across this?
Across all the philosophies.
Now the thing is, value should be defined according to some objective. So for you to make a decision, for that decision to be determined valuable or not valuable is a function of the way you're trying to get to. So here's where we're trying to get to.
Absolutely.
And
value is relative to the context.
Exactly. So, and at the moment, our objective function for humanity is GDP. And so in theory, we should argue that you should make decisions that maximize GDP, but that's not natural. Of course we don't do that. So we need to think, first of all, what is our objective function for humanity? Mm. And then we need to define a set of values that then create the behaviors that help people move towards that objective function.
I agree. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. If I was an informed person who didn't know nothing about philosophy, I may make an accusation against you for being communist. What would you say to that?
So communism. Let's
say Marxist.
Marxist. So let me give an example, which I sometimes use, which is, imagine in the future you're in your driverless car, and your AI knows that you're late for a meeting. your personal AI says that you're late for a meeting, and we know how valuable this meeting is to you, Daniel. So what we're going to do is we're going to give micropayments to all of these other cars. We're going to give micropayments to the government to change the lights so that they all move out of the way and we can get you to your meeting on time. This is a society where the free market organizes itself. So this is what you would argue as being almost like a capitalistic society, which sounds good. But the problem with that is that you might have an individual that's incredibly wealthy and that can always outbid you, no matter what their values are. They can always outbid you, and so they would always be able to get to wherever they want to first. So then you say, is there an alternative? The alternative is, okay, you've got one AI that understands the value of everybody and where they're going and makes a decision itself. So one is like a capitalistic model, where you're, and the other is one kind of benevolent, AI making the decision. You can sort of argue this is a communistic approach versus a capitalistic approach. I think that there's actually something that can work in the middle, and that's what we're trying to design in Satalia.
It annoys me a little bit. Everyone tries to put a political perspective into the left or the right, and it's just like there's no other alternative, you know. But the bottom line is, it's way more complex than that, isn't it? And I think we all, generally, most people tend to think that somewhere in the middle is where we need to be. That's the problem I got with this current general election. It just feels too extreme on both sides.
It's just human nature to be so, easy to be manipulated in one way or the other, and not to really think carefully about the stuff in the middle. And let me give you an example, actually, of some of the things that we do in Satalia. So we've changed this now, but we used to get people to make recommendations for their salary. And then we used to get people to then vote on whether those salaries should be reduced or increased or kept the same. So it would all be public.
So per level or per person?
Per person.
Wow.
But we would weight people's votes according to how closely they've worked with you over the past year, how knowledgeable they are about your domain, and how knowledgeable they are about the strategy of the company. Right. So I might have more votes for your salary than I will have somebody else. So it's like a democracy, but it's weighted according to people's ability exactly. And so when I talk about so I think that we can use these concepts of peer-to-peer decision making, decentralized decision making with weighted stuff to actually make much better decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does, absolutely. That's got an interesting concept. So I'd be interested to see how you manage to value the opinions of certain people more than others. I know it's justified, but how does that work in the algorithm? How do you get that working from an algorithm perspective? Must be quite complex.
It is, yeah. I mean, you have to look at all of your data, but also might not have it all in your data. So you might talk to people at the coffee machine during your break that might be inspiring for you, but that's not captured in the digital footprint. And so we also use surveys and things like that to try to capture other data that we might be missing in our day-to-day digital footprints.
Well, where did you get your inspiration from? In terms of your, because you advocate decentralization clearly, where did that come from with you? Was it you a Bitcoin investor?
No, I wasn't. No, I think that I've never imagined being able to be told what to do, and I don't like these ideas of hierarchies where by default somebody has more power than you because of their career trajectory or whatever. I think that so the way that the system works, I've always rubbed up against, and so I'm not easily to be told what to do. So I'm like, let's get as much information as we can. Let's make a decision, or we defer to the people that are best to make that decision. And I can see the frictions and bureaucracies that happen within organisations because of these traditional structures. And we've created these traditional structures because it's complicated organising people, and it's hard. But now what we can do is we can use technology, we can use these new ideas to rethink that whole model. And actually, not only is that going to enable my employees to be happier, it's going to also enable them to be able to innovate and work better for our clients, but also it's even IP that we can then productize and help other organizations go on that journey. So it's like, for us, it's a kind of it's all tied together.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That resonates with me because I'm also a massive advocate of decentralization. I got into it from reading Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper.
Oh, really cool.
I got money in Bitcoin, but it was just a hobby. I used to partner in a Bitcoin meetup group in Cardiff.
Excellent.
But what I was excited about wasn't so much the financial aspect of it. It was more the concept. And the concept was groundbreaking. I'd never even thought of that before. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and I think you can. There's many other use cases for blockchain technology or decentralized technology, however you want to call it, for other things, probably better than finance. You know what I mean? That would be better than finance.
Absolutely.
We were talking the other day in the recruitment world, if you could use blockchain technology for validation of people's track records. you know what I mean? Because so many people, there's a lot of fraudulent CVs out there. You know
what I mean? Actually, if you go back to this model that I've described in terms of how, if you can create a platform where people, so first of all, bid to work on something. So I'm a software engineer, let's say, and there's an opportunity over here for software engineering, and I bid to work on it, and through a certain mechanism, I'm able to work on that project. If my contribution to that project is validated by my peers or validated by an AI, then over time I can start to build a reputation on a blockchain as a software engineer.
Absolutely.
And I can start to now carry that reputation around with me.
And that's your value.
An entire portfolio of things that I'm beyond a software engineer. I'm a photographer and I'm a part leader. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. I think that would be brilliant. That would be so much more valuable than a CV because it's not corruptible.
Absolutely.
And it's validated by the cloud or by the community. So we'll have to stop talking about setting up a business after this.
That's cool.
But anyway, so and I love your passion for decentralization. Yeah. That's amazing. So let's bring this back to Satalia then. Yeah. Can you talk us a little bit about your sort of journey and the pitfalls you've had in trying to build this company?
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to challenge. I've always challenged the status quo. Wherever I haven't felt comfortable with something like, for example, raising investment or I don't know, identifying a target market and just following that. I've tried to not go down the traditional cookie cutter entrepreneurial route and really just try and call out what I think is bullshit and really try to follow my own values and sometimes I've done it through consciousness and sometimes I've just been lucky actually because I've been offered funding before and almost taken it and lucky enough not to take it because that would have changed the dynamic of Satalia. So I think I've made tons and tons of mistakes that would traditionally happen as an entrepreneur, like giving away too much equity and focusing on markets too long. But also I've tried to also call out every single time, is this really the right thing to do?
Yeah.
And not get to be caught up in the crowd. And it's only really in the past 5 years, so Satalia is 10 years old, but it's only in the past 5 years that we started to take off.
Yeah.
Because everybody's excited about AI. But the first 5 years were really hard. It was just me in my bedroom trying to solve problems. We had a platform technology that we developed from UCL that was way too early. So like a lot of companies coming out of universities, they're too soon. The technologies are too early.
Yes.
So
that happens a lot.
Yeah, and I actually I started it right at the in 2008, which was obviously a bad time from I lived in California for a few years as well, where I got to tour Stanford, Harvard, MIT, Berkeley, all of the best universities and learn about how they take technology and scale them into businesses. I was paid by the British government to go and learn how they do that, which is a real honour. So I lived in California and I've made all of the traditional mistakes that you make as an entrepreneur, but I've also resisted some of the core things like raising capital and I think that's why now we've grown organically, we're doing well, we're not overcommitting ourselves, we've got a great culture and also we have control over how we organise ourselves. If I'd have taken on capital, I'd have ended up having to put traditional management teams in place, traditional KPIs, all of this stuff that actually I think are not conducive for happy organisations.
No, absolutely. No, that's great. I just, out of curiosity, you obviously you touched upon there when you're in a situation whereby you've got to make a decision, you need to take yourself out of the kind of get out of the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day role and trying to make a more take an objective view on it to make a good decision. How do you generally deal with that stress? Because that's something we can probably all resonate with.
This is going to sound bonkers, really strange, but two things. I think that I'm a natural born optimizer, which is somebody that thinks about objective functions and have constraints and then tries to solve these types of problems. But this is going to sound weird, but my head is empty. And I didn't realise this until my early 30s, but from what I understand, most people have like a voice in their head. I don't know if you've got a voice in your head that's chattering.
I'm a very deep thinker, and something can happen in front of me and I wouldn't even notice it because I'll be so ingrained in what I'm thinking about.
So from what I understand, people have a lot of people have this.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
My head's empty, so my head is empty. It might not seem like it, but if I want to solve a problem, I have to stare at a wall and wait. And just wait until something appears out of my head. So there's nothing going on in there, I promise you.
You don't have the problem that I was talking about then, like many of us do.
But so, I think that mindfulness, meditation, all of that kind of stuff is meant to try and help people clear their heads.
Yeah, it's not for everyone, is it? I mean,
So I don't feel stressed. I very, very rarely ever feel stressed. I don't get
You're
angry.
very lucky.
Yeah.
There's a book that's just come out by Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game. I don't know if you've seen it, but he talks about how in business so many leaders make finite decisions based on essentially short-term thinking, and the ones who make infinite decisions based on infinite thinking, thinking about the long term, those tend to be the ones that succeed. Do you know what I mean? Would you regard yourself as an infinite thinker? Are you thinking beyond the goal of what you're trying to achieve in the real time?
Yeah, so I don't think I do it naturally. I think that if I because I have to wait for my brain to do whatever it does. If a problem is complicated, I'll end up sitting there for weeks or months and not actually be able to solve a problem. So I can't act usually. I can't solve a problem unless my brain allows it. So if you want to define that as infinite thinking, fine. But actually, I just feel paralyzed until my brain solves a problem.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sometimes a bad thing.
You must wrestle with things a lot, then.
Yeah. Well, I think something's going on in there, but I hope something's going on in there. But yeah, I and it can be a bad thing because sometimes I need to make a decision now.
Yeah.
And not wait, but my body, my brain won't allow it until it works out the best solution. Sometimes there isn't the best solution.
No, of course. Yeah. So in terms of current affairs then, there's the current political situation, economic situation, what's your evaluation of it and how is it going to affect your business?
I think there's a few things that are going on. It's a real shame that this kind of nationalistic borders, barriers thing is happening. I think that, to be honest, I don't have any real respect for the impact that the decisions governments make on society. If you look at how economics work, economic cycles massively outweigh any political decisions. Maybe there's been a few cases in history where that isn't true, but it's like fighting against a tsunami, which is our economic cycles.
Yeah.
So I tend not to get lost in the governmental stuff, and I think that governments and countries are a silly idea anyway. Yeah. So I'm not distracting myself about that, and I'm just going to assume that whatever comes is going to be affecting all of us, and I've just got to try and keep on building the best and happiest company I can be that operates globally. Because if I want the best talent, I have to access them across the planet. I can't just find them in the UK. And I need to make that happen. And I think that decentralization, blockchain, these technologies, these ideas are a response to nationalism and centralization. And it might and so you've got this nationalism, centralization wave, and I think that decentralization is going to come along and change that. I also I think that it's possible that in the next, this drive to make more and more money, this drive to invest in AI technologies to increase GDPs. I think Putin recently said that the nation that leads in AI will rule the world, and I do agree with that. And my concern,
I wouldn't normally agree with a Putin quote, but that is definitely probably true.
And I guess the concern about investing in these technologies that I have and making them smarter and smarter and smarter is that it's predicted that within our lifetime we are going to build a brain that is smarter than us in every single possible way. And I think that if we are still fighting over GDP, if we're still fighting each other over resources, it's going to see us as a threat and just going to remove us from the equation. And so my question is, how can we get humanity cooperating as a global species? Because if this thing does come along and if we can demonstrate that we can cooperate, then it might just leave us alone.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And the way that our current political system, our economic system is set up is through just increasing local resources, GDP, and it's just not sustainable.
No, I agree for sure. So what about 2020 then? What's the prospects for Satalia in next year?
We make organisations much more efficient, and I think that organisations are going to have to do more with less, and so I think actually we are going to triple in size over the next 2 years.
We're going to have an office move, of course.
We're going to have an office move, and we also are very, very careful about the type of clients that we work with. So we won't work with clients that we think are having a negative impact on society, like gambling and things like that. We will also try and work with clients that are not looking just to remove jobs. Yeah. And so if I want to attract and retain talent, I need to make sure that we are purposeful and that we're having a positive social impact, and I won't compromise on that. So we're very selective, but I think that's also very attractive from a talent perspective as well. we're going to triple, I think, in size.
Awesome. Well, that's
Yeah.
great. Well, I'm just mindful we're coming towards the end of
That's
the
all right.
allocated
Yeah,
time,
yeah,
but I do really appreciate you taking the time to do this, Daniel.
That's all right.
And we wish you all the best for 2020 and on beyond.
Thank
of
you.
course, and long live said decentralization.
Yes, absolutely. Big advocate.
Cheers, Daniel.
That's
All the
all
best.
right. If you